You be trying to slide in my DM, like, hey, big kid, when I see him, I just respond back, girl, let's get all that. We ain't gotta waste no time. See, I'm on it. I don't mean much, don't want you thinking I do. If that's one thing.
Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I'm here every Monday night on WEMS radio from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. And you can find me having conversations with people from all walks of life, people who have different perspectives, people who do a lot of different things. And when you come to my show, you can expect to find people who are artists, people who are business owners, coaches. I like to bring a lot of people from different backgrounds so that we can learn from them. We can also look at what's inspiring them. Some of the things that they do can inspire us. So the show is really about walking away being inspired, walking away with a spiritual tool that you may not have known about that you might want to practice. So you can find me on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Briggs Mason, and also on YouTube as Reverend Grenetta Briggs Mason, and I'm on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. And I give you inspirational quotes each day that can help you throughout your day. So today I have a very, very special guest, and we'll talk about a lot of things that are going on today and how we can cope with them and some of the ways and some of the tools we use. My special guest today is Chelsea Simpson. I've known Chelsea for over 4 years. I met Chelsea at Momentum, and a lot of people here are from Momentum, and I think I've explained Momentum many times, but it is an organization that does workshops and trainings that support you in your personal and professional growth. So a lot of the Momentum people are my family, so you'll see a lot more of them. Chelsea also is a part of my law of attraction group and just really has been an integral part of my life. So I'm so excited to have Chelsea here and for you to enjoy some of the conversations that we have all the time and get to experience Chelsea. So welcome, Chelsea. She's coming in.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm so good, Grenetta. I'm so glad to get to hang out with you
I
here.
know. It's like
Hey.
a regular little hangout. Like, although it's on camera, we'll just do our usual little conversation, right?
Every conversation is epic and amazing. So it's really
It's the flow. So introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are.
okay. So I am Chelsea Simpson. I wear a lot of hats, but a lot of them are rolled up in being a co-founder of the Emerging Leaders Project. And our premise is to equip, inspire, and transform the next generation of leadership to be able to meet the challenges of our times and transform systems. And so we do trainings and consulting and community building. And really, it's a place for people who know they are change agents and know they need a community to help ourselves grow into who we need to be able to be effective. And I teach at the New School. I do consulting with some different companies like Johnson & Johnson and some ed tech companies. My background is a community organizer and facilitator and coach. I'm also an emotional intelligence coach with Daniel Goleman. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of different things, right? Right. One of the things that I know that you're passionate about
Yeah.
is being the co-founder of the Emerging Leaders Project, right? And I remember going to the first weekend that you guys had, and that was a couple of years ago when you first started, and it has evolved over time. It will be interesting to talk about who is this group targeted? Who are you looking at as the next generation of emerging leaders? Is it have you defined the group, the characteristics of the group?
Yeah. So there our target demographic are people who are all in, who are really have designed their lives in some kind of way, and it's a really different variety of ways. People who are coming
Mhm.
to be change agents, and so that looks like teachers, doctors, pastors, consultants, coaches, people who are entrepreneurs in some corporations, people who work in nonprofits. There's a really wide range,
Mhm.
predominantly millennial and Gen Z,
Okay.
from people from the world over. It's a very intentional global community. So people from Sweden and Bahrain, and which I'm learning how to say correctly. I'm still not totally there. Mexico, Amsterdam, etc., because we know that a global community voice is needed for us to develop at this time. But that said, we believe that emergent leadership that's able to bring us into where we need to go is also it's we need all generations, and we love having an intergenerational space. So we have a really beautiful community that is predominantly millennial and Gen Z, because we do also want to explicitly equip people who will be facing the brunt of climate change, amongst other massive systems breakdowns in our lifetimes. And we know we need the support and guidance and accompaniment of people of all generations. So like Grenetta, for example, is the best, obviously, and any room that she's in is better for it. And so and her energy, and all of our emerging leaders of all generations have a sort of really open mind and curiosity, and a humility and confidence. And I think those are sort of some of the key character traits.
Mhm. 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 And when I heard you mention climate change, right? So what are some of the key issues? And I've been to a lot of the meeting, and I know you talk about a lot of the systems and changing systems, but if we can, break it down where we could talk about some of the relevant aspects that you would like to focus on, and then how you will bring those forth and actualize them. What are the plans for that?
There's a lot of parts of that question.
Right.
Okay,
No.
I'm gonna answer some part, maybe not all of it.
Right. Just go with let's go with what would be some of the key issues that you guys would be addressing. How about that?
So I think it's interesting because the risk of saying systems change is sounding too vague and too umbrella and too abstract.
Right.
The danger of naming, systemic racism, climate change, colonialism, sexism, heterosexism, all of these specific things that are all coexisting, is that they're also all, my belief is that there's a toxic intermingling that occurs, and there's in this system, and all of these different shit is on the decline. It's in hospice, right, in some way or another. And I feel my interpretation of current events is that it's for any kind of if there's a virus in a system, it has to be expressed externally for it to get and be able to see it and heal it and deal with it. And there's other, we're looking at this, the climate change part, it brings a sense of urgency, and the data and the research and that I see as being trustworthy says that we don't have a lot of time. The place to get to a global community that's able to be responsive and coherent is now. This is the time to develop that. So each of our stands, so someone in Bahrain and someone in Mexico and someone in the US, a white person, a Black person, an Asian person, a mixed race person, a Catholic person, a Jewish person, people have different parts of their own narrative that need tending to. Parts of the collective are different in each of us. So the risk of sounding abstract, I'd say that it's like this, there's a belief that I really hold, that in these we spaces, in these community spaces, over time, as we accompany each other, we're able to and uptool ourselves to be able to be more effective leaders and be and be both capable of bringing and arranging and making shit happen, but also capable of making ourselves people who can to deal with our own stuff. So y'all got a lot going on.
What came to mind when you said systems, and then you start to talk about all the different aspects of it, right? What came to my mind is there like a global type system that can address all of these issues from like top, and then it flows down to systemic racism, climate change, and all the other issues that we're focusing on. And is that what you mean when you talk about the systems change from that top level? Or
I think the thing that feels like it's alive for me is there's always different top levels. I don't necessarily have control or influence over the top, whatever top levels are. I'm probably not talking to them, right? They're not in touch with me, the top levels. So
no, I just meant like when you say system.
I hear what you're saying, but so part of my belief is that we each have much more power than we realize.
Okay.
And when we can, and for me, learning about how like trade agreements work and how trade agreements uphold all this other fuckery, I'll say it. Am I in this show? Okay.
That's okay. That's fine.
So, there's a way in which what's happening on a macro level and the systems level, economics and politics and sociology exists in friendships, exists in in a classroom, exists in a workplace, exists in ourselves and our families. So if the more we get or dealing with what's actually real in our own lives, right now, we don't need to wait for the top to get it, or we can't wait for the top to figure it out, because the top isn't in our control and isn't in our power. But what is our thoughts and behaviors and our relationships. I hope that makes sense. It may not, and I'm sorry if it doesn't.
Okay. I don't think that's what I was talking about, but that's okay, right?
All right, let's try again.
Right. So, but it's okay. I was trying to really clarify what you meant by systems,
Oh, okay, got it.
That's all I was trying to do. Yeah. Because when you said that, there were so many aspects to it, you didn't want to break it down to one, but we can break them down and talk about them on an individual level. We could talk about systemic racism on an individual level. We could talk about all of them on an individual level. So I guess I was asking, how does it systems approach?
Yep. I think it's part of it is at the risk of sound. I think that part of why our friendship is as beautiful as it is, and why I feel free expressing it in this way in this show, because it's your show, is that there's a premise, there's a spiritual foundation, and spiritual being interconnected. Interconnected. And the fact that our species is not an individual. We have a lot of mythology that we've created, but we don't actually, like our biology, at a cellular level, we're when we're breathing in the same room, we're exchanging cells, we're not separate.
Right.
And I think having a capacity to land the work and the interconnectedness makes it feel like it makes more sense sometimes to be in this space that can support other spaces, because not everything's going to happen in this space, right? But this is it's like the well, where people who are doing amazing racial justice work in the South through churches, or somebody who's doing who's a doctor doing COVID stuff in Miami, or someone who, et cetera. Like there's a place where we can come and we each get something that we need, because we're coming from a place of interconnectedness. So it's another way of saying systems, I think.
Oh, okay. Got it. You did mention spirituality. Can you talk to us about your spiritual journey? I think we are a little bit, we had talked about, I think you were Catholic and then you moved through different stages. Is that how you grew up Catholic, right? In
There's a couple
Boston?
of there. I grew up. I went to Catholic school.
Okay, got it. Okay, it was Catholic something, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and Episcopal church. I was an altar girl,
Okay.
and then I went to a Quaker college.
Oh, great.
Quaker is a very social justicey. It's very simple living.
You
Powerful.
chose that because as okay.
Yep. I chose that. My my dad had been in the Navy and was really upset about the Iran-Contra
Mm.
in Nicaragua in the 80s and decided to de-enlist, which is very complicated. And he was in New York City, and a Quaker meeting helped him de-enlist. And so my parents were actually married in a Quaker meeting house in New York.
Mm.
That was something that he was part of at that time of his life. That season ended, but it was always something that was curious to me and sort of an interesting part of my background. And I didn't ever expect it was a real. I felt like it was a real like divine intervention in some ways to bring me to that university because it was such a powerful place. I got to
Mm-hmm.
major in peace and conflict studies, which essentially is similar to what I'm doing now about this system stuff and the microcosm and macrocosm. We did like mediation and conflict resolution alongside economics classes. And yeah, so and the values of social justice are very deeply inculcated in the school. So yeah, a lot of my learning was experiential and based in doing stuff. Like,
Okay. I know you social justice means a lot to you. And I know that where did you lived a couple of places? Where were you living?
Greensboro, North Carolina.
Right, okay.
Greensboro is a really special place. There's have a significant role in the civil rights movement. The Woolworth sit-ins were there. There's a lot of HBCUs there. It's a gate city, so there's a lot of immigrants. And there's still, when I was there, and still, there's a very strong culture of activism and just community organizing in different ways. And so I'd gone to Mississippi just after Hurricane Katrina to do hurricane relief work for 6 months. I was in Central America for 6 months learning about community development in the Americas writ large. And I came back to North Carolina and I was like, wow, Greensboro is amazing. I didn't see it as clearly before. So those are some of the places that really influenced my thinking in being.
So given where we are today, right, with just all the unrest and everything that's going on, right? And you've always been in a social justice place. Is there a difference that you can feel and speak of now?
Yeah.
That wasn't there before? Yeah.
To me, the difference now feels like I use the metaphor of addiction a lot. And I feel my metaphor that makes sense to me in having a lot of family members with addiction. So having been through the process of people using and then having some series of difficult altercations until you hit a hard bottom. You hope someone almost would hit a hard bottom. So it's so painful. They don't want to go back to that. And sometimes as humans, I think sometimes pain is a strong motivator. It isn't always it, but it's a good way. It's a pretty consistent one.
Yeah.
And the slog of recovery, right? Of day by day practice and self-awareness and gaining tools and seeing what we've been numbing from that has kept us in the addiction is this long-term process. So my experience in the early 2000s in North Carolina, coming from Boston, was like there's very much in the throes of systemic racism, right? Where we're not even able to acknowledge it or talk about it. White people are not able to acknowledge it and talk about it in the same way. And if so, it's often an intense community of people who are talking to each other. And then coming from a background with a lot of like good white liberals from the North, there's some talk, right, for sure. And like, going to the march and the t-shirt and the things, which is great and important. And the risk though is having the feeling like someone has done, feeling like it's enough.
Okay.
And obviously not been enough. So I feel like now we're in a phase where there's, I mean, so many people, so many white people, unprecedented in my lifetime, are actively doing stuff and experimenting and being humbled and talking in different ways and reflecting and posting on social media. And so that feels different. Not different enough, but it's the trajectory is different than my experience.
Do you think that the millennials and Gen X that have a lot to do with that? You know, what role do you think that they're playing in this whole new, or because I know a lot of awareness, it's just not going to happen overnight where, you know, people who really don't even understand white privilege, right? So until you can understand what that is, that shift is going to be difficult, right? Because it's like you don't even recognize that it is what it is, right? So I was wondering, do you think that this younger generation?
I do think there's something. I think I'd reframe it just for the sake of. Sometimes I think we can. There's definitely a narrative in which millennials and Gen Z are pushing the conversation, and that's the thing that's one part of what's occurring. Another part, and I think, but in another sense, my generation and Gen Z, we also, you know, even if therapy wasn't normalized, even if I think people have been numbing, the culture has been so
numb
for so long, people didn't have the tools. Generations didn't have the tools that we've had access to on some level. There wasn't the same level of capacity to consider how am I not willing to even feel what's my own stuff, let alone society stuff. And so I think a lot of people have been locked in their own, you know, you could say trauma, you could say pain, you could say, you know, of them and their families and their friends. Everybody has stuff to deal with, but without tools, without a capacity and communities and normalizing mental health, you know, and like these things that it doesn't allow us to get expansive enough because we're too locked into our own little story and feeling disconnected. I think that my generation and Gen Z, we've grown up around more tools. So it's not there yet. There's still ways to go, but comparatively, I think it's allowed for also, I think, less, a little bit more possibility.
Okay. Okay, that sounds really good. You know, when we talk about everything that's going on, and we talk about how do we mobilize, how do we come together to make a difference, right? And one of the things that I would like for people to be able to do is get spiritual tools, right? Find some spiritual practices that can support them. And it's what I found after doing this show was it's not necessarily like religious things, right? Because people are coming up with a lot of different things to use as spiritual tools, right? And we also look at like our background and then how we relate to that now, what we learned, how we've grown, and where we are today. Right. So can you talk about some of the spiritual practices that resonate with you, that you're familiar with, that work for you?
Yeah, I think my students, I have them build an emotional intelligence toolkit. So as part of my premise is that we're going through these massive changes in society, and you know, it's not going to get less changing. It's going to get more and more. I don't think we're going back to any kind of normal, is my perspective. I think there's going to be different stuff, different. So in that, how we center ourselves, how we find our equilibrium is a really big deal, right? It's a really, really big deal. Because the other side of, complexity, the anxiety and fear and the stuff that's normal and human. And we can have tools. So what I call a spiritual toolkit for myself, I sometimes call for others, just to make sure there isn't any gateway word they close down to. In the emotional intelligence toolkit is like, how do we keep our amygdala, the part of our reptile brain that freezes up when we feel like, when we feel like we're getting a text from our boss, or we're having a scary conversation, or we're late on an assignment, or a tiger's chasing us. Our brain can't tell the difference between those kinds of threats, right? Even though some of them are actual physical threats.
Mm-hmm.
So, just stuff like breathing, it's like, how do we reconnect and not feel ourselves as separate? So stuff like this, like simple stuff, like breathing and moving our bodies, going for a walk, journaling, the stuff that people always say it because it's accessible and it works, so it's like, it sounds trite and cliche to say breathing, go for a walk, and journaling. It's like every listicle for the last 50 years has said the same thing.
Right. Right. Exactly. And you read it over and over again, and you hear it over and over again. But I find that, though, at some point you really do connect to some of those things, right? Like journaling and meditation. Meditation is one of those things where people have a weird reaction to, right? Because
we all know it's good. We all know the data. We all, no one's arguing against meditation,
right,
but it's actually, in my experience, but it's like, we're distracted and we're anxious and we don't want to be with ourselves, myself included. There's a couple mornings this week where I just didn't want to meditate, and I usually do. And that happens every week, every day.
Right. No, it takes practice. That's why it's important, I say, to have several things that can support you, because the purpose of creating this toolkit, and I want to get back to you when you said spiritual is one of the words that may have people hesitate. Is that what you were saying? The word, so you call it emotion?
I think Gen Z and millennials are like more open than before. I think that's changing the conversation. I think even 5 years ago, there'd be more shut down or just kind of like, not really for me. It's a little more normalized, but still, just in case, I don't want to. Sometimes to start off, I don't want to get people charged up. If they would miss the tools themselves. So
that's interesting, because I think about, as a group, that I would like to be able to have spiritual conversations with. I would have to change the name to emotional intelligence conversations. No, I'm just kidding. But, I'm just saying that, but because it would be interesting because one of the things I wanted to do is really open up spirituality so that it won't hit people in such a way, so that it becomes a normal part, so that it's not one of those things where, I don't know if I want to talk about it. You know how it's like religion, you don't want to talk about it, but I want to talk about it, and it's about spiritual conversation. So it's just interesting that to hear you say in that group, the spiritual part is still not quite.
Well, I just started the class this semester. We're only 4
classes. Oh, okay.
So maybe later on in the class, I'd be more comfortable. I think it's because my and it could be my own thing, right? But with institutions, with like schools and big companies and stuff, I don't lead with that word. I'll get
right. No, I get it. Right. It's. I think we haven't in the past, but I wonder if it's changing now.
I think it's changing for sure.
Right. We can look for like it to be, I guess, because there can be so much judgment around it, and it's so many differences. How people say, like, don't talk about politics and religion, and but I would like to say we can create a space where we can have open spiritual conversations, and because doesn't have to be just Christians or just Buddhist people. Just everybody can come together and talk about the impact of spirituality in their lives, talk about how it can support them, right? And the idea is to find these ways where it's an individual thing, find the way where it can work for you. And I think that can come from more open conversations. And that's what I like about bringing different people in, and let's talk about what it is and let's put it out there. So it's interesting to hear that, right? And to process, right? But I understand what you're saying in certain institutions, in certain places, right? Um, you may introduce it, but tell me about these students that you're working with at
New school?
Pace. Where is it? The new school, right? Yeah, the new school. And the thing is, it's what's interesting for me is that they're like 18 to 22-year-olds.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a whole group. And it's interesting to me too, because when I'm watching about what's happening for voting, let's say, I hear that if we could get the 18 to 29-year-olds to vote, right, then we can see a difference, right? And we're not going to tell them who to vote for, right? I was like, but maybe they'll be smart enough, right, to choose, right? Because they haven't been brainwashed. They haven't watched Fox News all day, right? So I feel like not judging so much when I feel like it's more about what you hear. If I only tell you good things about me, right? All good. You would have no idea my shady side, I'll call it, or my dark side, if I'm always just pumping the good, right? So it's interesting because sometimes I find I just cannot believe that people are letting this go, right? And so I have to detach. We have to really detach or we'll really be emotionally out of whack, right?
We need the tools. We all need our tools.
Yeah.
Using the tools every day. This is a
Every
time.
day, right?
Yeah.
The tools. What are the tools? And I like the tools are taking a walk, running, right?
Body moving
Being creative.
And being able to have and friendships are such a big part of it for me. Like to be able to have friendships I can be without having to be shiny or make something different than what it is, and be able to, and where with people like you, part of why our friendship is so important to me is that we both have a toolkit and we both know that okay, we get a second to feel it, and then also we have a choice still. We get to have a role in influencing our experience and how we frame it and how we support each other in our framing, and it matters. And so having that core of friends who are just such sacred relationships, that is a huge part of the toolkit.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think we have had a couple of little groups on community, like-minded people, a place where you trust people that you can go and really be yourself, where you don't have to put on anything and be vulnerable and open. And those are like great spaces, and creating great relationships like that are also a part of your spiritual toolkit.
And
right?
even with my students, something that a way that I am with them. I really think the way that I am with them is the most important thing, and being someone who can really, I show them trust and authenticity, and that, we have really bold conversations, and I share a lot about myself. So I also think it's important for them to. I know that when I was that age, I felt like there was such a pressure to decide this and know myself in this way and want this thing or not that thing, and I didn't know. I didn't feel like it was clear to me, and so I felt like I was gonna fuck it up somehow, or like what was, it all felt so risky and scary in times. And so
Mhm.
I share with them like that, like, I've been fired and broke and, had breakups and then was sad for a year and like, worked in a coffee shop, which was great for me. And like, there was nothing wrong with, I just like been very transparent about my journey
Mhm.
and my experiences.
Mhm.
Not in a way that not sharing from the wound, but sharing from the scar. Sometimes like, just, I want them to have an experience. The class is creative team dynamics. And we talk about these global levels of challenges that our generations don't get to skip over. Our generations that don't get to, like, it's coming, it's here. There's wildfires right now. There's climate
Right.
refugees the world over right now. It's
Mhm.
not in 10 years, 20 years in the future. It started 20 years ago and we've been in denial.
Mhm.
So my intention of the way that I'm being is to modeling what does it mean to be not be willing to be in denial anymore. And
Mhm.
I don't have any illusions that I'm not in denial about anything. I'm sure there's plenty of denial, but at least as much as I can be aware of,
Right, 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 right.
and friendships and teaching help with that, right? To have
Mhm.
a sense of some feedback about where there could be some stuff to discover,
Mhm.
but to model that as best I can. I think it really shows. I think that they need that in their adults.
Mhm. And not being in denial anymore, and can then have you shift
Mm-hmm.
to create change and have you shift to have something different occur. But
Mm-hmm.
to deny it is to act like it doesn't exist. And that's interesting. We talked about, during this time and coping mechanisms and how we get through these times. And some of the things that's interesting to me is, earlier you were talking about addictions, and what came to mind was mental health, right? And how, mental health is so important, right? And I find that, even so much more now, right? To
God, yeah,
figure out, right?
Lord,
And that's why I like the idea of, okay, so is there something you could do as an individual to support yourself, right? In staying sane, in finding joy, in finding a place of peace
yeah,
throughout all of this, because
yeah,
as it all comes on me and I'm strong and I got a toolkit, right, and I'm ready, right,
thing.
I find myself in these spaces where I have to pull out these items in my own personal toolkit. And
Right.
so a part of it for me is supporting people and creating those things, right?
You do.
I'm joyful and I'm having a great life and I'm happy, right? And all the stuff around me I am dealing with, right? But
Mhm.
I have that space where I can laugh and find some joy. And I like to share that, and have, yeah, and I know, and it's not from the space where, oh, everything is always great, but I think it's how you react to
Mhm.
everything that comes into your life. And I think that spiritual tools can support you
Yes.
in how you react and respond to all the challenges that are around you. And that's the message for me. What is it? What can you do when you find yourself in these moments, right?
Yeah.
All kind of moments, right? What can you do, or what resonates with you personally? Because, like you were saying, we've read so much about all these same practices,
Mhm.
right?
So,
What resonates?
I think there's a piece that I really has been really, really important in my own, and I think paid the biggest dividends is getting that when we talk about mental health, there's an association that I've had at least around it's being like the brain, and that's obviously an important part, and the brain is a big deal. We also have neurons and a brain in our heart, and we have neurons, a brain in our gut. So
Mhm.
there's three brains, there's data being collected from these three places that's informing our mental health,
Yeah,
right? It's actually our somatic health. It's not just this.
right.
And our muscles and like it's in our bodies too.
It's in our body. I remember reading something about the gut brain, right? And that's our intuition, right? in our
Yeah.
gut brain, right? You know, right?
But like when we get that, like having a beautiful conversation with a friend can be so good for the heart brain. And then
Yeah,
like sometimes like eating good food matters,
yeah,
it like not, and from a place it's not about being perfect or about fat shaming or about having the perfect body, which, can be a whole thing to deal with for anybody. And the gut health is different than that, right? It's like, are you able to digest food, digest information? So, with the simple thing there is, to me, is like, I can be mindful as I'm looking at and surveying what are the choices I'm making and how am I spending my time. Over time, it
hmm,
gets easier, right? It gets easier to notice what are the things that my body really responds to. Like for me, I know it's yoga. It's a thing that's a big deal for me. And I've been doing it since I was 16, but I didn't do it for the last 3 weeks at all. I just did it this morning because I wanted to be in a better headspace for this show. So, but I know that that's there to fall back on, and then I'll get back.
right. You'll go back to it,
But
right?
that's a piece
Right.
of grace, and giving myself grace,
Hmm.
to be a person who, isn't always going to be is going to be fall short of my own expectations of my own spiritual practices regularly. And so I've learned grace a lot from from you. And that's been a probably part of, I know your grace and ease is your mantra that's really come and infused and settled itself into my life in a way that has brought so much more ease and joy and less feeling of never enough.
So, creativity in your life. So I was going to say you do so many things. I got this going on. I got that going on. How are you creative, and what are some of the creative things you've done? And has COVID enhanced them or stifled them? Talk
Mm.
about your creative
Mm.
endeavors, right?
Yeah. I think I've I have a tender spot in my heart of always seeing myself as an artist, but also always feeling like I could be more of an artist. I'm not enough of an artist.
Mm.
So there's um and with that being said, for whatever reason, part of my programming is that I can't do jobs that I'm not completely infatuated with. I just get bored, I quit, I get fired. It just doesn't work for me. So just so I it's eventually created this entrepreneurship path. And so at the moment, like a lot of I get to use a lot of design tools, and part of the joy of working at Parsons Design School, it's a design school as part of New School, um, is that my students are so skilled and capable, and other faculty are so skilled and capable, and all these design tools. It's prompted me and it guided and accompanied me and given me water to swim in that is very designy.
Mm.
So I get to pick up some digital tools that helps me to express and clarify and make visuals some of the things that I'm so passionate about as part of my work and my trainings and my coaching and my stuff and this and like so it's a really beautiful time where the environments that I'm part of and the people I'm around, they're infusing themselves into making my work more beautiful and expressed. That
Mm.
said, I also love music. I love jazz music, as you know. So I see a lot of jazz in pre-COVID world, and like being around places where um, I really think at the end of the day, spirituality is about interbeing and our interconnectedness, and beautiful art that speaks to the human spirit is about interconnectedness. So the most beautiful form of either is interchangeable, right, in many ways. So I like to put myself in the way of interconnection, put myself in the way of feeling the lived experience. So live music, and I find museums a little bit boring, to be honest. I like them sometimes, but sometimes they're a little bit dead to me and weird. But they're still good. It's still gonna be a good vibe. Um, but music is really a big part of that for me.
Okay, good. Because I know that adding creative arts
Yeah.
to your spiritual toolkit can really be very, very supportive, right? Um,
Forget about all of our like wordy figuring it out, like have to know what it is, but just just to like to get at in a space that's more liberated and less judgmental of ourselves. That's what I think creativity is, a
Like
word that means that part of us.
resource space. I noticed lately that I like the spoken word and reading poems and listening to spoken word. Lately, I've been inspired by that, right? So it's interesting how we venture through different creative forms, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm interested in listening to more of that and
Mhm.
reading. So that's working for me. Um, what would you say would be some tips on how we can move forward? If you were to say, these are some of the things I could suggest as we move forward, because we're going to go through now, right? We still got to go through because it's not going to like
Yeah.
happen overnight. And I think we're talking about, it's about supporting people, really.
Mhm.
It's about how can we support people in being their best selves, living with grace and ease, finding joy, what they're passionate about,
Mhm.
and just feeling good about being human. Like I like what you said, the interconnectedness.
Mm. So do you mean just in general in the world or any specific?
And
Just
what comes to mind for you when I say that, right? We say
yeah.
57, just a lot of things come to mind. What resonated with you when I said that? I probably said a whole lot, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many layers of intermingled, interwoven, but distinct, but the same, deep, deep, right? um, so if we're talking, about that we're at this point where there's been a reckoning with systemic racism
Mhm.
that has been building for 400 years and isn't going back, right? There's no going back. And there's people it's people are reading this in so many ways. It's really shocking, right? It's really shocking.
Right, right,
We have an
right.
election coming up, right? We have a
Mhm.
possible coup, is what I've been hearing recently, right? We have wildfires and refugees. We have this hurricane in Mexico. It's just,
So much, right? It's like it's like when we talk about that's what it's like when I
yeah,
was like so moving forward, right?
yeah. Moving forward as the umbrella statement. Yeah. Well,
What does that
I don't
look
know,
like?
maybe a little more zigzaggy is this seems like it's more the vibe, but whatever that means over time, I'll be forward.
Right.
So in my class, and this is going to answer your question, but starting with a vignette, where we just read this article written by this guy named Dwayne Elgin, and he was on these presidential climate science campaigns in the 70s, and so he's been doing research into the climate for like 40 years. And his premise is that there's these 7 stages of this great transition that could lead to either to functional extinction or gradual adaptation. And
Mm.
we have this choice between breakdown is inevitable. Breakdown will mean systems will change, the wildfires, for example, the sewer systems and plumbing and HVAC and schools and how people go grocery shop and order on Amazon. Those things, breakdown is inevitable, but collapse
Mhm.
is optional. We still have some choice in how we get to breakdown or collapse. And breakdown can lead to something that's painful and uncomfortable in the short term, but immensely liberating in the long term because it allows us to actually deal with what's the tension points that have been here forever. So I really believe that the place that there's nobody who is not up. Nobody's not gotten the draft letter that they're up. We've all gotten a draft letter that we are up, right? It's our time to serve is now, and that's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Mhm.
All of our assignments look different. Me as a white person, my assignment looks different, right, than a black person, for example, or than a Latino person in white. It just does, right?
Mhm.
And there's overlap, right? And there's overlap.
Mhm.
But whatever our assignment, we understand it to be, we don't have to get heady about it. We don't have to find the exact perfect right thing. We don't have to, wail and, just get paralyzed, which is very tempting for us all. And I get it.
Mhm.
But we can always start with just being with the people who are in our networks, just having real conversations and learning how to do that. Which is a whole thing. It's not, there's a lot of parts of that, right? Just talking to people for real and getting engaged in a way that there's a million ways right now. I just, there's online, but in all of the doing, that's stuff that we all, that we get. But it's at the end of the day, in my perspective, the core program update is about our level of consciousness, which can sound like a goofy word, but like what are we willing to not be in denial about in ourselves, in our ancestry, in our country, in our planet. And we all have a healthy dose of denial going on. So none of us can come in saying that we're not there, right? No matter how woke we think we are, no matter how not woke we think we are, isn't the point. Our somatic system, like we all need to spend time learning and being able to be with our own emotions, where we shut down, where we get defensive, who we blame and why. We all have someone that we like to blame, like getting clear about that, like getting a little more humble and more self-aware is a step that can be balanced with also not staying in our own bubble indefinitely and being in the world and trying stuff and risking stuff that's real and other people can experience and feel and see in you, being on the court, not just being in our heads and thinking about it, but just doing stuff. But I think those two things need to be together.
Great. So it was good. You have any last words that you'd like to share and let people know how they can get in touch with you and what's upcoming for you?
Oh my gosh. Again, I'm Chelsea Simpson. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and all that. The website is emergingleaders.us. And my email is chelsea@emergingleaders.us. And so I'd love to be in touch if anything was of interest to you. We do different trainings and consultings and coachings. If any of that is of interest, I'm happy to chat more and share more information. This Friday is an event called the Marketplace of the Future. And it's like a World's Fair for sustainability and for brands and people who are creating the new normal, right? Who are creating something new in this world. So there's going to be, a company that makes pens out of sequestered carbon and people from all over the world. And it's like an old school Nintendo video game avatar. And you can walk around and just talk with people randomly like you would at an in-person event. So that's this Friday. So I suggest to come. It's going to be amazing. It's marketplaceofthefuture.com. So get in touch, come to that event. We have these beautiful global calls every other week with people from, you guessed it, global, from around the world. And we explore current events in a way with a lot of depth and profundity and fun. So if you get in touch with me, I can let you know when those are happening.
Great. Well, thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for joining me on Conversations with the Reverend G. You have a great, great evening.
Thank you so much, Granetta. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And you're such a wonderful host and such a dear friend. And your spiritual tools are so important, have been so important for me. So it's an honor to get to be here with you.
All righty. Take care.
Bye.
Well, this was a Monday night with Chelsea Simpson, Conversations with Reverend G. I hope you guys were inspired and enjoyed the conversation. I'm here every Monday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on WEMS Radio. I am Reverend G, and my motto is live your best life with grace and ease. So today, I would like to leave you with a mindful moment. And these mindful moments are times where we stop, we take a breath, and we just sit still for a moment to recharge and make our next moment the best moment. So the mindful moment for this evening is about listening. Are you really listening? I'd like for you to think about this week. How often are you listening? And one way you can look at whether you're listening is, are you talking all the time? Or are you hearing all the time? So there are ways you can look at and understand whether or not you're listening. And being a skilled listener really, really supports people, because people just want to be heard and they just want you to listen to them. And sometimes we want to give advice and we want to give support, but it's not necessary. So we want to work on what our listening skills are. So in your mindful moment, think about, how do you really listen? It's Reverend G. I will see you again next Monday. Have an awesome week. And you can find me on Facebook at Reverend Grenetta Briggs Mason, and on YouTube as Reverend Grenetta Briggs Mason. Check me out, Instagram, Rev Grenetta, for some inspirational daily quotes. See you next week. Bye.